Hello and welcome to video lesson 15. Today in the unit Social Context and Film Form, we are going to talk about a very interesting film movement known as Third Cinema. But before we move on to that, let's quickly discuss what all we talked about in the last lesson. So in the last lesson, we discussed another very important cinema movement which is known as the French New Wave. We discussed the prominent directors that belong to the French New Wave. We also talked about the associated tricks that have developed within this film movement, and we also touched upon the various impact that have been found on cinema as a whole through this concept of the French New Wave. In today's lesson, as I already mentioned, we are going to talk about Third Cinema. So we will be looking at the history of cinema in the Latin American countries, because that is where Third Cinema came to develop. So primarily we'll be discussing Mexico, Brazil and Argentinian cinema. We'll also try to cover the precursors that have actually led to the new wave in Latin American cinema, and finally try to understand how is it that the Third Cinema actually came to evolve. Now, what are the objectives for this particular lesson today? So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to trace the history of cinema in Latin American nations. You should be able to understand the social and political milieu in which cinema functioned. You should be able to gauge the role that was played by cinema in the nation's identity, and you should also get a good idea as to how is it that the new Latin American cinema came to be. Now, let us first try to understand what is meant by Third Cinema. I'll give you a very brief overview. So first and foremost, it is considered a Latin American film movement. It originated in the 1950s in Brazil. So it's through Brazilian cinema that Third Cinema originated. It's a highly political and distinctive kind of a film movement which was spearheaded by filmmakers who actually frowned upon the capitalist model of Hollywood film production. So, a production that looks at profit making from cinema. So that is what the people who started with Third Cinema were against. What these people did, what these filmmakers did, was that they viewed the cinema of that time as derivative and overly commercialized, derivative of Hollywood cinema and overly commercialized, because people were following the Hollywood style of cinema. What these filmmakers did was that they pushed for a radical form of filmmaking with very strong political underpinnings. So the cinema that they were proposing was there for a purpose. There had to be a very specific purpose to the kind of cinema. So any film that is being produced during this period, specifically with all these qualities, is known as Third Cinema. Along with the origin of Third Cinema in Latin American countries, there were also various offshoots in the Asian and African countries as well. So we'll just touch upon them also. So what it was that what Third Cinema can be categorized as this really revolutionary and a radical form of cinema, which is meant to expose the social and cultural ground realities of the Third World. Now, the Third World was a term that had come up that had been proposed by some economists, and this is where the word Third Cinema also derives from this term of Third World. So this Third Cinema, it evolved through a lot of manifestos that were given by various filmmakers and film critics as to what cinema should be, and it specifically was a criticism of the kind of cinema of the contemporary times. Now let us try to understand that how is it that Latin America actually came to terms or was introduced to this concept of cinema. So in Rio de Janeiro in the July of 1896, the first ever film screening in a Latin American country took place. It was closely followed by Buenos Aires in Argentina, by Mexico City in Mexico, Lima in Peru, Santiago in Chile and other countries. So as you can see, we have talked about how the Lumiere brothers had showcased their first cinema in their first moving images in Paris. So in 1896, it was actually pretty close that these screenings were happening in the Latin American countries also. So by 1911, what had happened was that most of these Latin American countries, they had these centers, so-called, that actually did screenings and exhibitions of various films for a larger public. Now with Brazil, Argentina and Mexico, they were the largest countries because they had a huge urban population. So what happened was that these countries played a very important and a very defining role in developing Latin American cinema. And from the outset, it's important for us to understand that from the very beginning, the audience of these countries was actually exposed to a cinema that was actually not their own. So they were watching cinema, as we did just mention that, cinema was introduced pretty early to Latin American countries, but it was not their cinema, it was not the domestic cinema. So it was all European exports, European films that the people were watching. By World War I, what had happened was these imperial countries, they started producing lesser films because silver nitrate, which is a very essential component in the production of film stock, was actually being diverted for something else. It was being diverted for the production of ammunition. So by the breakout of World War I, these European countries, they couldn't produce as many films. This became a wonderful opportunity for America because America was not involved in the First World War. So it swooped in and it actually really undermined the stronghold of European cinema, both in terms of production as well as distribution. And what followed was that Hollywood films started proliferating the Latin American countries. So which is why the Latin American countries, the audience in these countries, were more exposed to a foreign cinema, to a cinema that was not their own. Now let us try and look at what was early cinema in all these countries like. It's important for us to understand because that is what will give us an understanding of how is it that third cinema came to be. So we'll first discuss the cinema of Mexico. So as I just mentioned a little while back, in 1896 the first ever screening of moving images happened in Mexico. The audiences, the people, they developed this fascination for capturing and viewing various aspects of human life. And what is really interesting about Mexican cinema is that almost first 20 years filmmaking, it was predominantly a documentary practice. It's also very different, it's a fascinating feature. Why? Because for all the other countries, specifically the European countries and as well as America, this was not happening. These cinema industries had quickly moved on to fiction, but Mexico had stuck to the documentary style for 20 long years. It was because cinema was understood as a means of reportage. So it was thought to be an extension of journalism practice, which is why you encounter most of documentary films during this era. Now the pioneers of Mexican cinema are two people. They are Salvador Toscana and Enrique Rosas. So what they did was they started by opening these various salons which basically screened films, but films that were actually exported from Europe. So they opened these screening and exhibition centers where films were screened, but later on they also started making their own films because they developed an interest in capturing interesting moments of the geography of their country. One very important thing that happened was that through the cinema, what these people were able to do was that they were able to capture some really iconic moments from the Mexican Revolution. Now this revolution lasted from 1910 to 1917, which is why, as I did say, a lot of the early cinema in Mexico was the documentary style. This Mexican Revolution, what it did was that it ended the dictatorial regime of President Diaz, and that was a huge thing in the history of Mexico. So Toscano, what he did was that he also made the first Mexican film in the year 1898. After the revolution came to an end, a decline in the documentary form was visible because now people started shifting to narrative storytelling. So there was this sustained effort by the filmmakers because they had developed this new interest in fiction film. And two major kinds of films sort of came into being, so the first one was which were derivatives of exported Italian melodramas, and the other was that dealt with the national identity. In fact, the very first narrative film was actually a remake of an Italian film. So The Light, which came out in 1917, was actually the remake of an Italian film called Il Fuoco, which had actually already been screened in Mexico and was a huge hit. Enrique Rosas was the first director who actually gave Mexico its first commercial success. This particular film was called The Grey Car, or El Automobile Gris, in the year 1919. This film is really interesting because it's not just a fictional account, it was actually based upon a real life incident where there was this group, where there was this gang of robbers who, in compliance with the military of the country, had set up various loot events. So that way it was slightly like, it wasn't very in your face politically charged film, but it did talk about the events that were happening in the country. Now, the 1930s to 1950s are actually known as the golden age of Mexican cinema, or the Edad de Oro. During this time, the Mexican cinema was able to make its presence felt across international borders, and not just in Latin American countries, also beyond that. But with World War II and with the arrival of sound, what had happened was that a very conducive environment for Mexican cinema was developed. So Mexican cinema was really able to prosper. Between 1934 and 1940, there was this new president who was President Cardenas. So President Cardenas was the kind of person who exercised this protectionist policy. So what he did was that the cinema industry benefited from it because he introduced various tax exemptions for the domestic film production, and there was also this state owned institution that had come into being that was actually to look at the private funding for various cinema. So there were various genres that were developed during this golden era. So something known as the Comedia Ranchera, which was basically a comedy that was based in a farmhouse. Then there was the cabaretras. The cabaretras were nothing but your musical films that had a hint of the burlesque music, the burlesque performances that existed in Mexico. And then of course there was the charro, or the singing cowboy, that became this iconic element in the Mexican film industry. So all of these genres that we have talked about, they were derived from Western exports or foreign exports, but they did have their own Mexican touch to them. In 1943, something really good happened for Mexico. What the US did was that the US allotted somewhere close to 11 million meters of raw film stock. Now, as it is, Mexico was going through this wonderful golden period, so this really helped Mexican cinema a lot. And it did so because US thought that Mexico could probably be an ally for it in the Second World War. Really interesting things happened this time. There were lots of directors that really came into limelight. So directors like Emilio Fernandez or Luis Buñuel or Ismael Rodriguez, these were the directors that really shone during this time. And another thing to happen during this golden era was a star system was developed. So these stars were actually people who were not just national sensations, but they were able to cross these boundaries. They became sensations also in other Hispanic speaking, in the Hispanic speaking world. Now, another very interesting thing that happened to Mexican cinema was the 1930 visit by Sergei Eisenstein. Sergei Eisenstein, you might have heard the name, we did discuss about him when we talked about the Soviet montage theory. He was a Soviet filmmaker. Now, when he visited, so the people or the film directors in Mexico, they were greatly inspired by him, and a lot of films that came on later came to define the kind of nationalist cinema or the national cinema that Mexico created was actually inspired by Eisenstein's style. Emilio Fernandez and Gabriel Figueroa were two people. So Emilio Fernandez was the director, Gabriel Figueroa was a cinematographer. So these two people worked in a lot of collaborations, and one of the first collaborations that really stuck out was The Wildflower. Then there was another film called The Portrait of Maria, which in the year 1946 won the Cannes Grand Prix Award. So that was the first year that the Cannes Film Festival was actually held, and it was the first time ever that a Latin American film had won such a huge, such a prestigious award. Now, of course, everything that has a good thing, it also has every good thing has an end also. So with the advent and expansion of television broadcast by the 1950s, the audience started losing interest in cinema. So another thing that happened was that World War II had ended, and the European and American films came back into the Latin American film market with this vengeance. So all this good time that that Mexican cinema was enjoying, it was brought to somewhat of an end by all of these various factors coming in. So producers then no longer were actually people who wanted to make good cinema. They were businessmen. They invested money only in the kind of films that guaranteed some kind of a profit, and therefore low budget films kind of became the norm. And that is what meant that the kind of vigor and the kind of charm that existed during the golden age of Mexican cinema was actually gone. And therefore, of course, this meant the end of the golden age of Mexico. So this was Mexican cinema. Now let us quickly understand what was Brazilian cinema like and what was its history like. The history of Brazilian cinema is very similar to Mexican cinema. You had the same thing, wherein Lumiere brothers and their representatives, they came and they displayed these moving images. But one of the things that happened in Brazil was that these screenings that were beginning to take place in the Brazilian country was that there was this irregular power supply which hampered these screenings. But then in the year 1889, the first Brazilian Republic came to power. So this was a steady establishment, and therefore by the year 1907, the power supply was much better. And since this was better, automatically more and more people started going into the theatres, and also filmmakers started experimenting with the camera. So just like Mexican cinema had a golden age, your Brazilian cinema also had the Bela Época, which is also known as which basically translates to beautiful period, and it lasted from 1908 to 1911. Now this period is not a lot, but during this time a lot of good cinema was produced. By the end of your World War I, this beautiful period actually came to an end, and of course the reason is the same, that by the end of World War I, the European countries, the American cinema, it again came back flooding into the Latin American countries. With the arrival of sound, on the other hand, in the 1930s, a lot of film studios came up, and what this did was that it broadened the horizon of this concept of film, of the fiction film. So there were lots of genres that came into being. Now what was also happening was that these films that were being now produced, they followed these established norms, these established conventions that were being followed by the Hollywood cinema. So therefore there was the comedy, there was the melodrama, there were also literary adaptations and historical drama, but all of these were in some way or the other either inspired by, or they followed the norms set by Hollywood. One very interesting genre that came into existence in Brazil, and which is very specific to Brazil, is the chanchada. So the chanchadas were actually musicals, so they were of course your Brazilian musicals. In the year 1949, there was this studio that came up, which was known as the Vera Cruz. Now the Vera Cruz came up, or the idea behind the setting up of this kind of a studio was that it wanted to break away from the status quo of the chanchadas. Now the chanchadas were nothing but, as I just mentioned, they were musicals, and these musicals were derivatives of your European cinema, of the Hollywood cinema, and these filmmakers that were associated with Vera Cruz, they wanted to make cinema that was their own, that was a domestic cinema. And therefore there was this one studio that came up with the only idea to do that, and of course it was able to produce films. They were able to produce movies that did break away from this concept, from the concept of Hollywood cinema. And so there was this one really huge international hit that came in the year 1953, which is known as The Bandit, and it was a huge international success. It was directed by Lima Barreto. What it did was, it was really interesting because it was inspired by the Western genre, but it talked about Brazil, it talked about the Brazilian people, it talked about the domestic people, the domestic culture, the domestic folklore. And after this film became this international hit, it actually really inspired a completely new genre known as the Nordestern. So Nordestern is nothing but a combination of your Brazilian cinema, the northeastern cinema, plus the Western cinema from Hollywood. So it became a really good amalgamation, and this film, The Bandit, it became this huge success. However, in the year 1954, the studio folded because what had happened was that the production cost of the films that the studio was producing was actually pretty high, and the films were not able to bring back all that money into the studio, and therefore in 1954 the studio was shut. In the 1960s, something really interesting happened. With a highly charged political atmosphere, there was a change that was observed in the Brazilian cinema also. So a lot of young filmmakers, they came to the fore. These filmmakers, they were inspired by the Italian neorealists and also these, low budget filmmaking techniques that were used by the French New Wave artists during their time. The third thing that these people were inspired by was the Eisensteinian style of filmmaking. So these three movements or these three, things had some kind of an effect on these young filmmakers. They were not really happy with the kind of cinema that was being produced at that point of time. So they came together and they formed something known as the Cinema Novo. Now, the Cinema Novo actually is nothing, it basically just translates as new cinema, and this new cinema is the one which paved the way for third cinema, and we'll talk about that in the next lesson. Now, let us move on to talking about the cinema of Argentina, another very important country in Latin American history of cinema, so to say. Now, so Argentinian cinema was also very similar to Mexican and Brazilian cinema. The early films were one-reelers. So one-reelers are nothing but a short film that is shot as long as the roll of one film roll runs. So these one-reelers were typically newsreels or films that documented the social events that were going on in the country. In November of 1896, Federico Finger, what he did was that he filmed and screened 3 films which were very simple sites of the city of Buenos Aires. In the next year, in 1897, Eugene Pye released another film which was known as the Argentinian Flag. So this was also nothing huge, but it was a tiny clip, a small clip of the flag of Argentina just waving in the wind. Then something interesting started to happen. So there was this businessman by the name of Max Glucksmann, and what he did was that he started opening these projection theaters, and these projection theaters were not just meant for screening. What they did was they worked as cross-national film production, distribution and exhibition centers. So there was a lot of that was going on at that point of time. Argentinian cinema was beginning to form some kind of a industry. By 1908, Max Glucksmann, along with his brothers, was able to expand this business into Uruguay and Chile as well. So it started becoming a huge business and a very profitable one. The early films that were shown during this time in Argentina, the ones that were prepared or the ones that were produced by the domestic filmmakers, they portrayed the tensions that the people, that the country had with the concept of modernity. Now, it's important for us to understand that Argentina at that point of time was going through this development phase where it was seeing this rapid economic development, and therefore there was also modernity that was being injected into the society. So a lot of films tried to capture this tension between modernity and the society that was newly being accommodated, newly being introduced to it. In 1910, there was a film known as the May Revolution. Now, it was the first narrative film of Argentina. 1910 is also important. This film is important because it marked the first 100 years of the May Revolution. So that was one of the films that started the ball rolling for narrative cinema in Argentina. In the year 1914, the first feature-length film of Argentina was produced by the name of Amelia. Now, of course, in the 1930s, with the arrival of sound, there were some changes, and the typical film that came into the being was the musical melodrama and the musical comedies. And with Argentina, there was one very specific style that was fixed with it, which was the use of tango music. So all these films, all these musicals, they featured this tango music that was very, very specific to Argentinian cinema. In 1939, there was another film that came into being, which was not your typical melodrama, not your typical musical, comedy, which was The Closed Door, and it did wonderfully well, and it was very different from the kind of genre that the musicals were. Then of course there was this a very important director that comes into play in the Argentinian cinema history is Mario Soffici. So what Mario Soffici did was that he was this person who actually made in the year 1938 a film which is largely said to be an anti-imperialist film. It talked about how Britain had used the kilometers and kilometers of the rail services to their own profit. So therefore this film became the first anti-imperialistic film. In the year 1939 another film was released which was called The Prisoners of the Land. So Prisoners of the Land also had the same kind of a flavor. It started questioning the society, it started questioning the government. By 1940 Argentina was doing really wonderfully well. So it was producing more than, like, it was close to producing almost 50 films per year. And again, so this was the time that it was at the height of its golden age. Now with the advent of World War II, something interesting happened. Now Argentina was going through this golden period, but World War II didn't really do very well for Argentina. It did really wonderful for Mexico, but not for Argentina. Now what happened was that Argentina decided to stay neutral during the World War. So the US wanted Argentina and to actually side with it. So, but it wasn't very sure of Argentina's intentions. So it actually was thinking that probably Argentina harbored Nazi, what do you say, sympathies, right? Like it was a Nazi sympathizer. So what US started doing was that it pulled back on its support, on its supply of raw film stock to the country. So what this did was that it automatically had an effect on the film production in the country, and it hampered the domestic film production. However, in 1946, Juan Perón, who was the president of Argentina at that point of time, came into power, and with his policy and with his focus on social justice and economic independence, decided to use cinema as a propaganda tool. So therefore your cinema then started having backing from the state. But it also worked in the form of intervention, because then suddenly, there were various forms of censorship and blacklists that were introduced. By the 1940, in the 1950, the government fell. The filmmakers again felt this freedom to be able to express themselves, and therefore during this time again very interesting, very revolutionary kind of cinema came into the forefront, or the beginnings of something that can be termed as revolutionary cinema started being exercised by various directors. So directors like Leopoldo Nilsson, or with films like The Hand in the Trap or The House of the Angel. These are the films that actually did wonder, that changed that scenario of being under censorship or of trying to follow an established norm as done by your European or your American cinema. Now inspired by these filmmakers, the new bunch of young filmmakers, they were inspired by them. So, and they started calling themselves the 1960 generation, and they formulated something known as your Nouveau Cine, or your new cinema. So this new cinema again, through this new cinema again, a lot of new kind of cinema was worked at, that was trying to break away from your Hollywood conventions, from the European exports, and from the interventions of the government. So films like The Candidate and The Odd Number came into play. In the 1960s, again something wonderful happened, which was that there was a change in this setup, and a group came into existence which was known as the Grupo Cine Liberación. Now what this group did was, it brought this really radical shift in the filmmaking process in Argentina. So that was it for Argentina. Now you would have realized that while discussing all these different cinemas, the national cinema or the domestic cinema of Brazil and Mexico and Argentina, we have come to the point where the filmmakers, where the industry is proposing something known as the new cinema. So what is this new cinema? What is this this new wave that is coming through in Latin American cinema. That is now what we will be discussing. Now, we have talked about Italian neorealism, we have talked about the French New Wave just in the last lecture. So you know that similar situations had existed in Italy and in France, where new wave movements were coming into the fore, which were these really conscious efforts by the filmmakers for a cultural shift in the way cinema worked, in the way cinema functioned. In your Latin America too, a new kind of cinema was coming to being. However, this new cinema or this new wave movement in the Latin American countries was not just this effort for a cultural shift, but it was catalyzed by these radical changes and upheavals in the nation's political landscape. So you had governments coming in, you had coups happening, and all of this had a deep effect on the psyche of the people of the times, which is what gave birth to the new cinema. So the years 1959-1960 were really important in the international front because there were some major upheavals that were taking place in international politics. A lot of colonial countries were losing their stronghold because the nations that they had their imperialistic powers upon were actually freeing themselves, were gaining independence. So a lot of new nations were also coming into being. On the other hand, there was of course the Cuban Revolution, where the guerrilla forces that were headed by Fidel Castro were able to overthrow Fulgencio Batista. So there was of course the change of power, the change of regime there as well. Now all these major changes around the country, they fostered something new. They fostered a cultural as well as a political renewal and debate in the entire world. Another thing that was happening around this time was that the world was sort of divided into these parts. So economists and observers, political observers of the time had said that the period of the Cold War was actually when the countries that sided with the US were termed as first world countries, and the countries that sided with the Soviet bloc were termed as the second world countries. Now this of course left the rest of the world. So the rest of the world, or the countries that did not side with either of the blocs, came to be termed as the third world countries. So this also came to be known as the third wave, wherein the third wave was that you're neither joining the first block nor are you joining the second block, and therefore you're choosing the third way and you're choosing to stay neutral. So these countries came to be known as the third world countries. Of course, this phrase came to be used in very different terms throughout history, because today a lot of people understand third world countries as the countries that are still developing, or the countries that are in various stages of development. So this was how all of this was happening. Your new wave cinema in the Latin American countries was taking birth during all these political upheavals, during all these changes that were taking place, and therefore the kind of cinema that came to emerge out of the Latin American countries, specifically Mexico, Brazil and Argentina, it then came to be known as your third world cinema. So this has been a very short introduction to the history of Brazil, Mexico and Argentina in terms of their cinema. So let's just quickly do a recap. Let's try and understand what we talked about today. So in order to understand third cinema, what we talked about the arrival of films and the beginning of the practice of filmmaking in Latin American countries, with a special focus on the countries of Mexico, Brazil and Argentina, because these are the countries where cinema actually started to emerge from. We also discussed the various precursors, cultural and political, that led to the beginning of this new kind of cinema, which basically is the new wave Latin American cinema. We talked about how is it that this term of the third world or the third way came into being, and how is it being able to associate itself with the term of third cinema. In the next lesson, we will continue this forward and we will discuss about what happened and how exactly is it that third cinema is actually coming into being. We will talk about how third cinema is a cinema of manifestos. So we will discuss the manifestos that have been important, that have come out during the third cinema movement. We'll also discuss the various goals and characteristics that define third cinema, and finally we will be discussing the legacy of third cinema and where is it today. So I hope you've enjoyed the lesson today. I'll see you in the next class.